Your health, your way, your community. Make the change. Join the movement.
Okay, welcome to this special edition of Heal Me. Today we're joined with Nora Lens, and we're going to talk about pets, and we're going to talk about how to look after them naturally, and also rotational monofeeding, which I actually haven't heard of, so I'm really interested to hear about that. So first of all, welcome. And do you want to just give everybody a really quick introduction to yourself, what you do in your journey to talk about this topic?
Sure. My name is Nora Lenz. I have a little bit of an echo here, so it's kind of distracting.
I'll see if I can.
Is that something you can fix, or do I fix that?
I think it might just be your. It sounds fine now. It only went that like that to start with. It sounds good now.
Okay, I don't hear it. Yeah. No, there it is. That's okay. I can deal with it.
Do you have two browsers open? I can start this again. Do you have two browsers open?
I don't think so.
Because other people say they can hear it too. Let me just double check. Everybody's muted on here, which they are. Oh, Chloe's on. Chloe's a vet nurse, so she'll probably have some questions. Okay, everything's muted here. It's just whether or not you have two browsers open or like a Zoom app open and the browser. If you don't, it should be fine.
I have my browser open with lots of tabs open. Should I close those?
No, everybody, to me, it's okay. Everybody says it's gone now. So what I'll do is, just so that I don't wreck anything, I'm not going to start the recording again, but we can edit this intro out after. We'll just keep the recording going in case it.
Okay.
So,
no,
yeah.
I don't hear it anymore, so I don't know what the deal was. I didn't change anything.
Good.
Okay, super. All right, so my name is Nora Lenz, and about 38 years ago, I started learning about nutrition, the truth about nutrition, and what humans really need. And then I started applying some of that information about biologically appropriate eating to my animals. And I started that probably around 1995. I started feeding raw food to my animals. And I just sort of made notes about what I was doing. And I was running a dog business at the time. So I would write up what I was learning and hand it out to my customers because I just wanted everybody to have this information. And in those days, information like this was hard to come by. So it just turned into a book eventually, and I started selling that book probably about 16, 17 years ago. This is it right here. It's not available in print form yet. It's just an ebook right now. But I sort of developed a way of feeding dogs, mostly dogs. I mean, it's cats too, but cats, the way I feed cats, it really isn't that distinct from the way other people raw feed cats. But with dogs, it's a little different because it takes all of the feeding methods that have been used to when people want to get their dogs off of commercial pet food. And it puts really the best of all of those methods together into one method that really seems to work, and it keeps dogs out of the vet's office. And that's success for me because what I've discovered about the vet industry is that I personally don't want anything to do with it because it's modeled itself after the disastrous medical model, the medical industry. So anyway, I don't know how much detail you wanted, but that's
perfect. Yeah. It's very much along the lines of what everybody here is doing with their journeys as well. So anytime we can get extra, insight from someone like yourself is great. So the first thing I guess I want to ask is rotational monofeeding. Is it literally just you're only feeding them one, it's just beef, and then you rotate and it's just something else? And it's what does rotational monofeeding actually mean?
Right. Well, the delineation really, for my purposes, is between animal foods and plant foods because dogs historically have eaten plant foods as a secondary fuel source when prey is scarce. So what would happen in the wild is they wouldn't go off and eat some blueberries and then go kill a rabbit and then go eat some more blueberries. They would eat the blueberries when they don't have access to the prey. So they would never be combining the two. And what I know about human digestion is that we do a lot better when we eat one type of food at a time. It doesn't have to be one specific food at a time. Like you can mix a couple fruits together, you can mix a couple of meats together. That's not a problem because they're the same basic characteristics. And digestion is mostly chemical. And so that's really important that the body be allowed to produce, or, it's not really only able to produce one chemical environment in the gut at a time. And so it makes sense that we should feed foods that require an acid environment in the gut to be digested, to feed those things separately from the foods that require more alkaline digestive chemicals.
Definitely.
So that's what rotational monofeeding is. Like I said, you can mix proteins and you can mix plant foods, but you shouldn't mix the two. That's basically it.
So you know how like a lot of people's dogs, they'll poop on the side of the road while someone's walking him, and then the owner's like, "Oh my God, oh that's terrible," and then they like have to scoop it up, hold their nose and stuff. And I'm just like, I'm pretty sure they're just, well, first of all, they're probably feeding him like, dried foods and all that sort of stuff. But it's like humans, like so many humans make terrible smells. And it's like, why are you combining meat and grains and fruits together in the same meal? It's like, that's what's going to happen. And like you just explained, I mean, I didn't know the terminology, but yeah, like that's what, animals do too. They're not going to eat all that stuff at the same time. It's one or the other,
Right.
depending on the meal or the day or the week or whatever. So do you find that that's when you're feeding animals that way, dogs or cats, that they don't have foul odors in their stool and they don't like do doggy farts that clear out a room and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, great question. They do have transitional, I would say, flatulence, and sometimes when they are overfed, they can have that problem. But what we hear most often from people when it comes to talking about the benefits of feeding dogs properly is that their poops are absolutely not malodorous. They are not unpleasant to deal with. They're not unpleasant to pick up. When dogs have a meat day, like when they eat meat, when they've been given the right proportion of bone to meat, their poops are hard, condensed, dry, little pellets, basically, because their bodies make use of all that food coming in. It's a little different on plant food days because dogs aren't herbivores. They are not set up to make maximum use of plant foods. And even though they are a secondary food source for dogs, and plant foods naturally have lots of fiber, and the fiber you eat is the fiber that you poop. So plant foods are going to be more voluminous than meat poops. But yeah, that's a great benefit for home feeders who are doing things correctly.
Yeah.
They don't have to deal with those disgusting kibble poops, and they are disgusting.
Yeah, sometimes I just laugh when I see people on the side of the road. They're so embarrassed. They're talking to the animal like the animal's done something wrong. And it's just like, you're probably just feeding them like so many different things at once that are just terrible. So Linda just says, my dog stopped to crop grass like a couple of ponies went out walking after a breakfast of raw meats. They choose it. Is there a difference between animals? Because I've had cats and dogs and that, and they will eat grass, but I have just seen that as they kind of know they need some roughage because they don't digest that either. Like it comes out as grass, right? So do you see that as different from eating plant foods? Because there are some digestible plant foods, like let's say it was blueberries. To me, that's different from grass. So how do you see that?
Yeah.
Is that an animal's innate intelligence telling them they want just pure roughage or what?
It is different. And the animals that dogs eat actually have those foods in their stomach. But here's the thing. A lot of people don't realize that the researchers have actually observed repeatedly that wolves will shake the stomach loose to separate the contents from the meat before they actually eat the rumen or the stomach, the tissue. So, as far as eating grass, there's all kinds of theories about why dogs do that. Nobody knows for sure because something different, something different can happen if three different dogs eat grass. One dog might pass it all the way through, another dog might vomit it. And another dog, you might not even see it it usually do see it in the poop though, because you're right, it does not get digested. They don't have the right equipment to break down grass. You have to be a cow or a horse to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I didn't know that it was different though, the way you just described. Because when you said like it's different for different kinds of dogs, I was like, oh, okay, I thought they all just yeah. So that's good to know.
A
Joel
lot of
said,
dogs do it, and they do observe that wolves eat grass.
yeah,
So
right.
it's a normal, natural thing, but nobody knows why dogs do it. We can, some people say it's because they have kind of an acidic stomach and they're trying to alkalize their stomach. Other people say they're trying to make themselves vomit. Other people say it's something lacking in the diet. I don't think we can assume any of those things, but I don't stop dogs from doing it if they want to eat grass, and I don't worry about it if they eat it on top of a meat meal. My dog doesn't do that. I have seen her eat grass just a couple of times in the 6 years I've had her, but I've seen other dogs eat it every time they have the chance.
Mm.
So,
Yep, definitely. Yeah, I wonder what it's. Yeah, I mean, they know, right? Like we might not know, but they do. It's like they're
yes,
like if they could sniff out a steak or a grass, they're going to go for the steak. They're not innately drawn, but there's something about them that is drawn to eat that grass at that time.
right.
Um, so Michaela says, "What's Nora's thoughts on raw milk for dogs?"
I don't think dogs should be eating milk products. They don't have lactase, which is the enzyme that breaks down lactose. And whether it's raw or not, pasteurized milk is a disaster for humans and dogs. But here in the States, raw milk is kind of hard to come by because it's been all but outlawed. And so, when people ask me this question, I say, I used to kind of think that milk was kind of like liquid meat, but then I started thinking, now, wait a minute, we don't make lactase past the age of weaning, and neither do dogs. So I don't think dogs should be eating, drinking milk products. And it's not worth the effort, to get raw milk for your dog because it takes some effort to get it, at least here. I don't know if I don't imagine things are freer down there, but here it's hard to get and it's expensive. And if, dogs can get what they need without drinking milk, they can get everything they need at a regular grocery store.
Yeah, and what about so the same would apply for cats, right? Because I see the same in all carnivorous animals, but then it's so traditional for people to leave a saucer of milk out,
Right.
particularly for cats. And being pasteurized milk, obviously that's going to be terrible. And I would imagine from what you just said, there's no benefit to doing that with raw milk either for a cat.
Hey, I've never really looked into whether cats can digest milk. It doesn't make any sense that they would because no animal in nature drinks milk past weaning. So, I wouldn't feed it to a cat, but it is odd that we have that, iconical saucer of milk cat thing, you know?
Yeah, who knows where that came from? You know how a lot of people feed their dogs rice? They'll actually cook up rice. Do you ever do that? Because is that part of a like any kind of sound dietary regime?
No, rice is really not food for dogs. It's pretty starchy. It's hard for them to break down. Usually when you feed rice, it comes out looking the same way as it went in. And, the standard recommendation that vets give to people when their dogs are vomiting or actually, I can't remember what all conditions vets will recommend this for, but they send people home and they tell them to cook up a meal of cooked chicken and cooked rice. And, they call that their bland diet, right? Well, it's a disaster because not only is the combination a disaster, but cooking the meat is kind of ruins it for dogs. And the rice generally isn't going to get digested. Um, Dogs will generally eat rice when it's combined with meat, but they won't generally eat it when it's not because they recognize that it's not food. There are a couple of plant foods that dogs would not get in the wild that I include as options in rotational monofeeding in the book. Just because people coming in want to feel like they're giving their dogs something satisfying and home cooked. We have to find something that suits the owner's preferences like that and is also at least marginally digestible by dogs. And those two foods are cooked squash or cooked yams, sweet potatoes, the sweet tubers, and quinoa or millet, which is a high protein seed. It's not a grain. And I sort of reserve that meal for dogs coming in that won't eat fruit because raw fruit is better for dogs. It's more natural. We've seen wild dogs eating raw fruit. We have never seen wild dogs eating, cooked food on their own, at least. So anyway, I give people that option, but it's generally something that people will move away from. I don't feed cooked food to my dog anymore.
Yep.
Yep. So anyway.
Cool. Yeah, good answer. There's it's interesting because like my dad used to barbecue chunks of meat, like meat on the bone, like the dog cuts and that, and he'd barbecue it and give it. And I'm like, Dad, like when have you seen a dog barbecuing anything out in the wild? It's just, but some people just don't hear it. So before I go on to other diet questions, I just wonder, because you've been in this a while, do you find that it's difficult sometimes to educate people? Like they just don't want to hear it. They're like, nah, that's not right. Like we give our dogs this all the time and they're fine. The same things that humans say, like, why would I want to eat like raw food or better quality food? Like I'm fine. I've been eating this way for years. Or what? Is it the same thing? Like, or are people generally, because I've seen a lot of people care for their animal better than they care for themselves. Like they don't really care what they eat, but they'll take good care of their animal because they don't feel they're worth it, but they project that onto the dog. Like I'm going to take great care of this animal. So I just wonder, like, do you have any difficulty with educating people and people turning around their ideas of, yeah, dried dog food biscuits? Of course, that's dog food, as if it would be bad for dogs. Like, is it the same indoctrination or is it a bit easier than teaching humans about how humans are supposed to eat?
Well, there is a lot of resistance among people who feed commercial food, commercial pet food, because once you decide in your mind that you don't want to do that anymore or that that's bad, then you have to do something about it. You have to either that or you have to live with the cognitive dissonance of knowing that you're harming your animals. So people get very loyal to the brands of food that they feed. And I think that's crazy. I think that's just a matter of indoctrination by the pet food industry because, before maybe 50, 60 years ago, people had absolutely no choice other than to make their own food, and their dogs were actually healthier then. So we need to get back to thinking of the dog as if not a family member, at least, a creature that would do better eating your leftovers, assuming that you eat, relatively healthfully, than, commercial pet food. People just they don't understand that commercial pet food truly is the waste disposal arm of the food processing industry for humans. And people have so much trust in government and the agencies that are tasked with or supposedly tasked with, making sure that we don't get poisoned by food processors and that our animals don't get poisoned by pet food processors, that they trust that, you know, anything that's made by the commercial pet food industry is not going to make their dogs sick. And there's a scare right now going on in the United States about Purina. And I'm seeing all kinds of posts on Facebook about, oh, I just fed my dog Purina or Farmina or, you know, whatever brand they're feeding, and they got sick. And I'm so mad that I was feeding that because obviously it's one of the bad foods. And my comment to that is sickness can happen at any time when you feed your animals garbage. And it doesn't matter what brand you're feeding because it's all garbage. It has to be because nobody could take perfectly good food like I buy for my animals and package it up, trim the fat off, package it up, and sell it, you know, in the same form that I would feed it in my dog. Like if I brought it home and I didn't have to do any trimming or anything, nobody could afford to do that. It would be prohibitive. They have to buy the food very cheaply because everything else is so expensive. The marketing, the packaging, the processing, the you know, the fancy websites. And you know, that money that they have to spend to produce the food cannot go to the food. It has to go to all of these other, you know, expenses. And so, I mean, it's just, it doesn't matter what brand name it has on it. It's garbage. So yeah, that's, you know, but once we get people thinking about home feeding their animals, at that point, they become much more open to the idea of how what they eat affects their health. And sometimes, and one of the reasons why I really love doing this work is that people will see their animals healing before their eyes, and all they have changed is what goes in the animal's mouth. They see that happening, even though they hear about all of these other things that are supposed to deleteriously affect our health. Like, what about EMFs and chemtrails and stress? And you have to do yoga every day. You know, dogs don't do any of that. You just change what you put in their bowl and they heal. They heal. So that sends a message. It gets in the back door. You know, people are all kinds of resistant to the idea of changing their own diets until they see their dog becoming more energized, having more mobility, becoming happier. All of those things that they see in their dogs, in addition to, you know, reversing disease, they see that in their dogs and they go, wait a sec, maybe I should rethink this thing about, you know, how I'm feeding myself. And that's a great side benefit for me to see people doing that.
So then just leading off of that, there's a question here about fasting. So when you see an animal that's been injured or gets, like, they naturally just will fast themselves, right? But they know to fast because it's going to heal them quicker or whatever the case may be. So then what about a dog owner? Are there times, what do you think about fasting your dog and not giving them food if you're kind of overseeing their health?
Fasting is very much a part of RMF, rotational monofeeding. When we talk about fasting in the dog feeding world, people generally take that to mean like 1 day a week, 1 day a month, something like that. Or sometimes they'll even feed their dog like one food, or they'll feed them nothing but fruit, or they'll give them nothing but juice all day, and they'll call that a fast. That's really not what we do in RMF. It's a big topic because there's a stigma around fasting, especially extended fasting for dogs, because it's still thought of as neglect to not feed your dog. But what's not neglectful about fasting is that we who have done it ourselves, we understand what's going on with the animal. It's a sacrifice for us. It's easier for us emotionally to feed our dogs every day. But if you see a dog throwing up, no matter what they eat, or, having diarrhea or having some kind of inflammation in the body, all of those things respond to fasting. It's just a no-brainer because dogs historically have, when they're injured or sick, they find the quietest, darkest place they can find, and they cannot hunt, and nobody brings them food. So they have within them the ability, they have adapted the ability within them to heal. Just like when you cut yourself externally, if you misfeed yourself every day, or if you misfeed your animal every day, those are just a series of little injuries happening inside your body. And when you stop doing that, then they can heal. Well, you can stop doing that by way of feeding only proper foods, and you can also do that by fasting. I don't really recommend that people fast their dogs right away coming in. I recommend that they educate themselves about it. And we do a lot of talking. I do a lot of talking about fasting. I've made videos about fasting. I have an article on my website about fasting. And it's really difficult to find information online about fasting. It's practically impossible. As far as I know, I'm the only one, and that my fasting article has been on my website probably 13 years. So when I started talking about, it's just starting to be embraced now by dog owners. But when I started talking about it, there was nobody. So, and I've even had vets, sort of plagiarize me in articles because they will use my wording when they talk about fasting. So they have no experience of their own. They have, and I think if any of them were pressed, they wouldn't be willing to fast a dog for 5 or 6 days. But I have actually a couple of vets now who are talking in terms of 5 or 6 days of fasting for your animal, for your dog. And that was previously kind of unheard of. So things are slowly changing out there, but there's still a lot of resistance to the idea of fasting dogs out there in normie land.
Yep. Oh, and themselves. Most people won't take a day off of food.
Right, exactly, which would be the best thing for them.
Yeah. Nat asks, what about fresh versus frozen raw dog food? It's hard to always have fresh.
Well, freezing is something that we have to do just so that we don't have to shop every day. I have a gigantic chest freezer that is always full because when I have opportunities to get wild food, which I do sometimes, I like to really stock up. So freezing is something that we have to do, and it doesn't really seem to harm meat very much. We imagine that when wolves are out, when they make a major kill and they eat as much as they possibly can and they cache the rest, they store the rest. There are times when they go back and it's either frozen or it's been frozen and it's thawed out. So it's something that's sort of normal for dogs to do, to eat food that's been frozen. So, it's always best to feed food that is fresh. Sure, yeah, if you can get a fresh kill. But fresh kills are, pretty hard for us to manage in domestic circumstances because you pretty much have to have, chickens in your backyard and whatnot. And I don't know very many people who are, willing to do that. I'm certainly not. It's bad enough having to buy it.
Linda says, I've been told my 2-year-old dog is allergic to chicken. He only eats raw food and he does scratch whether he eats chicken or not.
Yeah, the chicken allergy thing is pretty misunderstood because I think what's going on with chicken allergies is number one, it's usually chicken that is in kibble or some kind of cooked product. So that's the first thing. The chicken is usually cooked. But the second thing is that chicken is very, very fatty. And there's no chicken product, whether it's a pet food, a raw pet food, or a cooked pet food. There is no chicken on the market that is trimmed of fat before it gets to you. The producers like to put lots of fat on animals because that makes them money when the animal is killed. And there's this long supply chain that happens once the animal is killed. And everybody just passes the fat along to the end user, which is you and me. Nobody trims it. So, they try to hide it. When you buy a steak, you'll find the, fat hidden underneath in the package. And, but, it's there. And I've heard from so many different owners who say that once they started trimming the fat off of the chickens, that their dogs don't have that problem anymore. So,
Okay. All right. I was going to find the next one that was relevant in the. So, Juanita says, dry food, saying that it's grain free, would you stay away from it? I'm pretty sure we stay away from dry food altogether, right? But like she's specifically saying if it says grain free.
yeah, that was my theory is that was big pet food having a go at the smaller companies because
Hang on, I'll try.
like the big companies, Purina and others like Purina, they didn't like the collective slice that these so-called boutique grain-free foods were taken out of their profits. So they paid some vets to, I don't know how the vets were paid, but it has been proven in the last year that the vets that came up with this idea that grain-free kibble causes heart disease in dogs was pretty much invented, and the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, went along with it. And before you know it, we had a huge rumor going around that this food causes heart disease in dogs. It was always a rumor, and it was really interesting to watch how it played out because vets who would never in a million years connect a dog with a presenting issue to the food that they're fed are suddenly thinking, oh, it's the grain-free food. That's what's causing this heart disease. Well, kibble causes heart disease, period, full stop. So grain-free, grain full, it doesn't matter. Whether it has grains in it or not, it doesn't matter. It's garbage. So.
Cool. Yeah, well said. There's another question here just because this one comes up a lot, raw eggs with dogs. So like I have seen dogs specifically go after eggs like very naturally. So what do you think about raw eggs or raw eggs or raw yolks?
Yeah, I think eggs are fine. I don't feed them myself. The yolks are very fatty, and apparently if you feed eggs too much, there's a substance in the egg white that can interfere with the uptake of B vitamins in dogs. So I'm not sure if that's true or not, but I tell people if they have chickens in the backyard that are giving them eggs every day and they have to economize, they have many different dogs, it's to feed raw eggs is fine. So it's just it's not necessary, but it's fine if people want to do that. And you would want to feed eggs with a meat day. So you would want to not mix them with plant foods. They are animal foods. So
for sure. There's a question here that says, I'm interested in a daily/weekly eating plan for your dog. Is that a simple question, or is that something that's like outlined on your website and things like?
Well, it's in the book, and what I do is I give people a rotation, kind of an option. Basically, it's like you have 3 different kinds of days. You have a fasting day, which is people don't have to do a fasting day if they don't want to, or you have meat days, or you have plant food days. And among those 3, you can choose not to have a fasting day. You can just feed your dog a meat meal once a day or twice a day, whenever you normally do that. And then the next day you can feed them plant foods. And then the day after that, you can feed them meat. So you can do alternating days like that. You can do alternating days fasting and meat, and in that case, you'd want to feed a little bit more meat. But that's what a week would look like. Like I really have randomized the way I feed my dog, and she eats mostly meat because right now I'm able to get wild venison bones and salvaged meat from deer. I live in a state where we're allowed to salvage deer when it's hit by cars, and there are people that do that. And I've been able to get in on that a couple of times. So I'm actually able to feed my dog practically free because I've availed myself of that hardly anybody knows about. But anyway, to get back to rotation, my dog eats mostly meat, so I fast her probably maybe twice a week, and then the other 5 days she gets venison bones and venison meat, just muscle, and I give her liver treats to just so that she gets some organ meat. And that's it. I mean, but if somebody wanted to, they could feed a couple of plant food days in a row and then have a meat day and then do a couple more plant food days and then a meat day. Plant foods do not tend to keep weight on dogs. So if you end up having too many plant food days in the rotation, you'll have a dog that is losing weight, maybe too much weight. And the way that you get the weight back on them is you feed more meat. You feed more in quantity and you add more meat days to the rotation.
Okay. And earlier you mentioned bone to meat ratio. Is there a particular ratio that's good?
Yeah, good question. It's a moving target because every dog is different. Some dogs can eat an entirely boneless meal and still have a solid poop. And with other dogs, they have to have consumable bone with every meal. And this is the part that really kind of departs from what is thought to be a healthy food for dogs, because dogs really do need to fully consume bones. And that's why I'm not that quick to vilify poultry, even when people say that their dogs are allergic to chicken, because for small and medium-sized dogs, poultry is pretty much the only game in town when it comes to consumable bone. And consumable bone is like fiber for us. It keeps the stools solid. So you kind of have to experiment with your dog. I usually tell most people to start with 30 or 40% muscle meat, and then the rest, some kind of bony meat like chicken or turkey necks, chicken necks, that kind of thing.
And you mentioned a few times about trimming fat. Is there something about fat that's not really good for dogs?
Well, there are two things that make fat bad for domestic dogs. One is that, actually three things. One, it's a very dense fuel source and they don't use much fuel. Two, the fat cells on agricultural animals store residues of the garbage that those animals are fed. And so when our dogs eat the fat, they're getting the same garbage or residues of that garbage, waste from that garbage that is fed to those animals. And three, there just is not much fat on wild animals. And if you doubt that, you can demonstrate it to yourself. And I've done this myself. In fact, I have pictures in my book of a wild rabbit compared to a farmed rabbit. I have a picture of a lamb heart compared to a kangaroo heart. And the farmed animals are fatty, and you just don't see this on wild animals. I have occasion to feed wild rabbits sometimes to my animals, and I bring them home and I, clean them, process them myself. I skin them, and there's no fat there. There's no fat. So, and I've done the same thing with a bird. There was a bird that was killed in my driveway. I don't know if it was hit by a car or what, but I went out there and got it. I brought it in the house and I took the feathers off, and took pictures of it, and there's no fat. This is an animal that flies dozens, maybe hundreds of miles every day and lives in a cold climate like where I live and still carries no fat. They need stored fuel and they need insulation, but they still carry very little fat. So that fat that is on agricultural animals is basically put there for one reason only. It's not for storage. It's not for insulation. It's so the processors can make money when the animal is killed. And that's a problem. That's a problem that we have to think about when we go to feed our animals, that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Like a lot of game meat, like kangaroo, venison, and that's very, very lean, like really, really
Yeah.
lean.
Yes.
There was a question here about, I've lost it now. It was about so someone tries to feed their cat like chicken and tuna and that, but they'd turn their nose up at that. They only eat dry food. Is there something they can do to help the cat?
Well, the phenomenon with cats that makes them different is addiction. Cats get very addicted to kibble. Cats in general, just as a matter of their disposition, the way they are, their nature, they just don't like change. They don't even like to leave their territory that they live in. So you have to introduce the changes really slowly. And I have some instructions that are free
Yeah,
to
fucking
everybody.
well. I'm praying for you, man. I'm praying for.
And God, just meet yourself if you're.
Renee's got a ticket in too, actually, mate. So same goes, mate. If we win, I'll buy you a house, mate.
Hang on, let me just mute him.
Okay, I continue.
Right, yeah, that's it.
Hang
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so anyway, as I was saying, I have some instructions on my website. It's a blog article. It's called How to Raw Feed a Cat. And it takes you all through the steps that you have to go through to introduce a cat to raw feeding. And they can be extremely resistant. Kittens take to raw food right away. You don't have to transition them at all. But when it comes to a kibble addicted adult cat, you have to kind of break some of the rules that we have for dogs because I don't like mixing raw food and commercial dog food together as a transitional thing. It's not necessary at all with dogs, but with cats, you do sometimes have to mix commercial food with the raw food and kind of introduce them to it slowly. And sometimes you might even have to like braise the surface of the meat slightly so that it starts to resemble something that they might recognize as food.
Okay. Cool. I didn't realize that they're so addictive and resistant to change.
Yeah.
That's super
Yeah,
interesting.
they can be really tough. And if you have a really old cat, like 15 years old or something like that, it's a hit and miss. I've had some cats that were that old that I tried to transition
Why is my
and nothing
audio not
worked.
working?
So I'm just having it. This doesn't usually happen. Guys, if you're on and you're just make sure you stay muted. I'm having to mute everybody. The next question was with regards to mRNA. Is there anything that suggests that there's mRNA being injected into non-organic meats where you are? And if so, would you avoid that sort of stuff?
You know, I have not looked into that at all. I haven't even heard anything about
Have you got
that.
earthing?
Hey,
Yeah,
Scott,
I
mute
don't know.
yourself.
Normal one.
I don't know where they.
All right, he's off now. I might even kick him
Okay.
off because he keeps doing it.
Okay. Okay.
Oh shit.
Um, so as far as I can see, we don't really have any choice in that if that's being done. I mean, I welcome whatever information anybody has about that. I haven't heard about something like that being injected. I know that there are some meats that the meat processors will use they call them enhancements. They're just chemicals like saline and other flavorings that they will inject into meat. But those are usually the ones that are like commercial, like the butterball turkeys that are sold at Thanksgiving. Those will have some of these chemicals injected into them. But like if you buy just regular meat from your local grocery store, I don't know. I've never seen and heard anything about that.
So Nikki says, when our dog eats raw bones, his poo is almost immediately hard and chalky and difficult to pass. Is this a concern?
It's not really difficulty for them. It just moves out slowly. And if you have any concern about that, you can add lean meat to the meal. So like if you're feeding something like chicken legs or chicken necks or whatever, those are fairly bony meats. And if you find that your dog's stools are very chalky, you can add some beef or kangaroo or whatever you have access to in terms of boneless meat, lean meat, and that will loosen it up for you a little bit.
Okay. This question is similar. Does Nora always recommend that bones are consumed whole and chewed versus bones that have been ground up with muscle meat?
Well, you can't really buy bones that are ground up with muscle meat that are appropriate to feed for dogs, because that will fall under the commercial raw pet food category. And what I've found about those raw commercial pet foods is that they make use of this river of fatty waste that's coming out of agricultural animal agriculture. And it tends to be very fatty, and there's nothing you can do about it because you can't remove the fat. So if you're grinding yourself, that's completely fine. If you have a grinder, some people do grind their meats because there are some dogs that will actually get themselves in trouble gulping foods that they shouldn't, that, like, there was just somebody in my Facebook group last week whose dog managed to eat an entire chicken leg without chewing. He just swallowed it. And she didn't know that that was generally, or is usually, not a situation that you would rush a dog off to the vet for, because unless it gets stuck, it's not a problem. It's going to go into the stomach and it's going to be fully digested. Well, she actually took the dog to the vet and they did x-rays, and they actually entertained the idea of cutting that dog open to remove that chicken leg that completely, the next day, dissolved into those hard little crumbly poops that, your other member was just talking about. So that's, it could have been disastrous for that dog owner if she had gone along with that vet's idea about opening a dog up to take perfectly digestible food out. So basically, to get back to the question, you do have to know your dog. If you have a dog that you even suspect will wolf their food, will gulp their food such that they might end up choking on it, then you can cut up the food in appropriate sized bites. And dogs can actually get a really good sized bite past their throat. That's normal to them. They basically chew the food into chunks. They bite off chunks from the carcass, chomp, chomp, swallow. That's it. They don't masticate their food at all. So, but some domestic dogs will get so enthusiastic about eating that they will get themselves in trouble. And, people usually know if they have a gulper on their hands. And for those dogs, you just cut up the food, or you grind it, or you feed a part of the animal that is way too big for the dog to swallow. Like you might give a tiny little dog a chicken leg, and there's no way that a tiny little dog is going to be able to swallow a chicken leg. So, it's just an example. Or you might give a medium-sized dog an entire, Cornish game hen. We call them Cornish game hens. They're just adolescent chickens that they sell here under that name, Cornish game hen. And, you might just put that down and see what they do with it. A lot of times people will like take a chicken leg and hold one end of it and offer the other end, the thick end, to the dog and let them chew on that. And so they can get some practice chewing and whatnot. But, I tell people to just know their dog. I have a dog that I can completely trust to not swallow anything that she shouldn't, that would get her in trouble. I've seen her leave little tiny pieces of bone that I was sure that she could swallow, and other times I've seen her swallow much bigger pieces. So she's able to discern that, and I don't know how, but I can trust her, and I do every day because I feed her venison bones, and they're much bigger than she can swallow. So she has to bite off pieces in order to make use of the food.
Okay. It's interesting that because some dogs just aren't smart like that. Aren't there some breeds like pugs that if you don't stop them eating, they'll just eat till they die? Like they'll just blow. Like, as in, if you give
That's
unlimited food, they would not stop eating it that's in front of them. You have to like literally stop them eating.
I do think that there are some dogs that would eat themselves to death. I wouldn't risk pre-feeding for dogs with any kind of food, but there are some people who do that. And once again, you basically have to know whether you can trust your dog. So many dogs have gotten themselves into trouble when they have access to unlimited food, like when they get into the cupboard where the dog food is stored, and they can have a go at a big bag of commercial dog food. A lot of them end up in the vet's office with something called GDV, which is where the stomach turns over on itself. And nobody knows why that happens, but it happens a lot when dogs are fed big meals. So anyway, I don't recommend free feeding, or even it's called gorge and fast, the model of feeding. And I know of a couple of people who feed their dogs that way, and they swear by it. It's a very natural way for a dog to eat because that's what they do out there in the wild, right? They don't walk away from a kill before their bellies are full. They eat to satiety, and they eat a great deal of food, and then they might not eat again for days or even weeks.
Mm,
So
100%.
that's how it's done in the wild, but in domestic circumstances, it's tricky.
Yeah.
And yeah, there are some the small, like the pugs and the ones that have the smashed in faces, their equipment is a little bit malformed, their chewing equipment, their swallowing equipment, all of that is a little bit deformed and malformed. And I think it's just better to be safe than sorry. But there's a lot, I hate to say that because there's a lot of fear out there that's really unfounded.
Okay. Makes sense. We'll do two more questions. The first one is about dog livers. Dogs eating chicken livers. Would you give them chicken livers?
Yeah, I feed beef livers actually to my dog. I just make treats out of them. And some people will tell you that a dog has to eat a secreting organ, and a liver is a secreting organ, with every meal, but I don't think it needs to be included with every meal. I make dog treats out of sliced beef livers that I can buy at the store, and I dehydrate them myself, cut them up for treats, and that's what she gets for livers. But yeah, if you have access to chicken livers, you can throw one of those in with the meal, and then the liver, the secreting organ part of the meal or requirement is satisfied.
Okay. And then last question we'll do is from Chloe, who's our resident. She was a vet nurse. She quit because she hated the industry. She just realized it was a butchering industry. So she says, for elderly arthritic dogs, do you add any supplements like turmeric or omegas? And do you ever add in apple cider vinegar? I worked at a raw feeding pet store in Canada for 6 months, and it worked really well.
No, I don't really recommend any of those things, because one of the things that we hear most often from owners of elderly dogs is that when you feed rotational monofeeding, RMF, mobility starts improving right away, energy starts improving right away. Those things, you couldn't put a plate of turmeric down, or however you pronounce the word, turmeric down, and have a dog eat it. They're just not going to eat it. Dogs are at least some of them are discerning. They know what they can digest and what they can't digest. And I think if those things have any effect in the body, there's bound to be, or a positive effect, there's bound to be a cost, because, you know, they're not going to be nourishing the body because there's nothing really in them that the body needs or can utilize. Um, so they're just going to be taxing the organs of elimination. And I just think it's better to follow nature as much as possible and feed dogs lean, low fat, you know, meat products that are as close to the wild model as we can get, and then use plant foods on other days to displace the meat that we would otherwise be feeding if we fed our dogs meat every day. That would constitute overfeeding, because with a domestic dog, it's very easy to overfeed a dog that is laying around all day. We don't see dogs in the wild laying around all day. They have to earn their food. And if food is not earned, it becomes waste in the body. So I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but I don't, no, I don't recommend any of those things. Even the oils, like the fish oils, none of those things are, they're all more or less embraced by people who haven't discovered that there's a way to do things without all of that nonsense that, you know, that incorporates just nature and works and just works without any, you know, question marks. Like, should I be feeding this? Should I not be feeding this? You can get feedback from your dog right away because their health starts to improve right away. We've seen just amazing, amazing healing stories. My parents, resolved cancer in their dog, and their dog ended up living to 19 and a half. And just so many testimonials and success stories, and so many conditions that are only made worse by vets that we've seen turn around completely.
Yeah, beautiful. It's so good to hear that because it's so parallel to humans as well. Same things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything that we didn't talk about or anything you wanted to bring up before we wrap the call?
Oh, I can't think of anything. But I would just recommend that everybody read the ebook and start to view the veterinary industry in the same way that you view the medical industry, because the vet industry has sort of gotten a pass. They're always represented in popular media to be the, you know, the kindly, curmudgeonly, you know, compassionate, empathetic. Um, and the industry has really moved away from all of that, from that kind of person, you know, that was represented in the media when we were growing up. And really, they're all about just selling drugs now. It's just about selling drugs. And when they're not selling drugs, they're selling procedures that remove body parts. And what they do in the end is just make disease worse. And so I really want people to think about the vet industry in the same way that they are starting to be very jaded and suspicious and cynical of the medical industry.
Definitely. And then, so where can we find the ebook and also find you if people wanted to continue to follow your work?
The website is called rotationalmonofeeding.com. And I have a very large Facebook group that is free to anybody who wants to join. And that's also called Rotational MonoFeeding. And I also have a private subscription group that I moderate myself. And I do weekly video Q&As where I take questions from the members in my subscription group, and I put out an hour-long video every week. And I'm hoping to have the print version of the book available. I don't know if it's going to be prohibitively expensive to ship to Australia, but I can, you know, let anybody know who's interested. But what I recommend is that if people want a print book, they just buy the ebook and then have it printed. And that's usually what people will do. But anyway, and then I have a YouTube channel also, it's under my name, and then I also have a YouTube channel under Rotational MonoFeeding.
Beautiful. So I don't forget to mention it later, I have a contact in the States who I've just spoken to about publishing. He can help publish books that are really quite inexpensive and get into Australia as well. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, I'll get Nat to maybe swap out emails and stuff, and we can I'll just give you the contact. I don't know if it would work out, but like you said, it could be super expensive, but he's got these ways to do it. So it's just
Okay.
who has contacts in the industry that's usually the way. So
Super. I love that. Yeah, absolutely. I
All right.
I don't want to deal with Amazon. You know,
Yeah,
the only way that I've ever sold my book is on my website, and it allows me to own the transaction. I own the transaction between myself and the reader, the buyer.
totally.
And I don't want Amazon, you know, taking 90% of the profits and sending me a check for
Yeah.
my work. I want to get everything that I have coming to me for my work.
Totally. And then, of course, the types of things that they do with the money at Amazon, they're not exactly
Yeah,
the nicest people. So,
exactly. Right. Censoring.
yeah. So, okay. Well, thank you very much for your time today. I learned a lot, and the comments as well are mentioning how much people got out of it. So that's great. And if people want to follow your work on Facebook and things, then of course they can look you up there, your website, and we'll put those into the description when this goes up as an article. And if you want to have it for yourself too, to put on your site, we'll send you the copy.
Yeah, I will want that for sure.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you once again, then.
Thank you so much, Tom. This was really fun.
Great. And thanks everybody for joining. See you later.
Bye.